foreign, predatory, parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanized to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. Hi, welcome in Canberra. Actually 2 weeks in Canberra, because the previous week I was in Senate hearings and inquiry hearings, and then attended a conference in Albury at the organiser's request over 3 days. So I want to first of all say thank you for tuning in, and we've got quite a few things for you today. Just an update, because I haven't done this for a few weeks. So the first thing I want to celebrate is Craig Kelly joining One Nation, coming on board. Craig is an absolutely fantastic individual. I've known Craig since before I got into politics. I put a bit of pressure on him on climate, because I just thought he'd be like all the rest, and he's not. I gave him information, he used it. Hard data, he used it. If Craig says something and it's based on data, it is bankable. You can take his word for it, well and truly. He's persistent. He was very strong on COVID. Very strong in pushing back on the calling of ivermectin horse paste. I mean, how stupid has this been? He was very strong on opposing the COVID injections, especially the mandates. Craig, he'll get the data, make up his mind, and he'll be relentless in pursuing it. He is an absolutely fantastic individual. Go get him, okay? I'm just reading some of the comments at the same time as talking. So, yeah, Craig is just a wonderful human being. He believes in humans and humanity. And it's just so wonderful to have him on board. And I look forward to working with him. He's going to be working in the federal sphere of One Nation, helping us to be more successful in the future in elections. Which reminds me that we now have a One Nation member of Parliament in every mainland Parliament. That's 5 states: Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, and now Western Australia. We've had another defection. Someone has come over to us from another party over there. I think it might have been the Labor Party, but they can see the light and they've joined One Nation. And of course, we've got 2 senators in federal Parliament, Pauline Hanson and myself. So the only state without a One Nation representative in Parliament is Tassie. So who knows what will happen in the future there. I want to mention, speaking of Australia, I want to highlight this book. I was very fortunate to, gosh, I don't know which way is up here. There's the camera. What a capital idea. It's a pretty weighty book. You can see how big it is, how thick it is. But it's written by Christopher Reynolds. If I can get the author's name up there, it's pretty heavy. And it is what a capital idea, and it is a wonderful book. I haven't read it, so I'm just going on what other people say. But I went to the presentation in Brisbane. Oh gee, what was that? A couple of weeks ago now, and by Christopher Reynolds, the author, and Graham Young was there, and a fantastic law professor, a conservative law professor. One of very, very few. Most of the legal faculties in around Australia have gone woke, but James Allen will never be woke. I can tell you that. I know James. He's going to be on a podcast with us pretty soon on a very controversial topic, which I'll tell you more about in coming weeks. We're trying to organise a date. It's so difficult. We've got days booked up for months. So I know several people have been wanting to get hold of me and do media appearances. we're flat out finding a date, but we will get around to it. But anyway, James Allen introduced Christopher Reynolds a couple of weeks ago in Brisbane. And James was very funny as usual, but also very serious. And Christopher Reynolds showed what a historian he is. This is no dry, dull book, I can tell you. He went right back into the prehistory behind Australia, what happened in Britain, what happened in Europe, what the global scene was going on, which formed the colonization of our country, and then the independence of our country, and the formation of our country. This guy has researched things meticulously. He's found things that have never been discussed before, and he puts it in not as dry old data, facts and figures and dates, and like most historians. This guy puts in stories, personable stories. So I know a number of people on the night bought the book. It's doing pretty well. It's not cheap. It's about $80 on a discount, $109 I think total. But I'm told it's an excellent book. It's an outstanding book. And here are some notes I made because I actually had a talk with the author afterwards, a couple of weeks afterwards. It's thoroughly, and these are my observations from the night as well, thoroughly and comprehensively researched history of Australia. I mean, it is comprehensive. There are so many points that he covered on the night that I've never heard before, and engaging stories. Stories of personable stories, human stories. People are interesting characters in our country's past, I guess, in a country's history. And it justifies why we should be bloody proud of our country. Australia has been the first to do many things in the civilized world. And he sets the record straight in many. It's not a defensive book. It's a very engaging, proactive book. And you can find out more about it, order it if you want it, www.Reynold, R-E-Y-N-O-L-D, learning, one word, reynoldlearning.com, www.reynoldlearning.com, R-E-Y-N-O-L-D, learning. Personalities, and as he told me, and as he told the audience, and in my personal meeting with Christopher, he said it deals with the personalities, it deals with the money that it always has to be part of the context of driving history. It deals with the people, and it deals with the context. It really is a remarkable book by the look of it. So if you're interested in history, interested in Australia, if you're bloody proud of the country like I am, grab the book. I've got one. Speaking of proud of Australia, there's something I'm not proud of. That is the fact that the government is continuing to lie to our people. It is continuing to behave with inhuman indecency. We have seen record immigration figures. In January alone, this year, January 2024, we had 125,000, slightly above, 125,000 people come into the country. 1 month. So that's about, that is around about 1.5 million people. This is not tourists or anything like that. This is residents, future residents, come into the country. We had some leave, and of course, and after you do the net people, number of people who've come into the country, after you take away the people who left, 55,375 new Australians or future Australians came into the country in January alone. That's 660,000 a year, if my maths is correct in my head. 666,000, 55,000 a month, multiply that by 12. That's 660,000. That is huge. January was a new record for monthly immigration for January. Not just a new record squeaked over the line, 40% higher than the previous record, which was January 2009. We've had big immigration from both the Uni Party, Labor and Liberal. They form what we call the Uni Party. Policies are almost identical. They both want a big Australia policy. Think about what that record immigration is doing. It's driving up the cost of everything. It's driving inflation. It's driving the cost of housing through the roof. We have now got an occupancy rate or vacancy rate of less than 1%. I think it's 0.7%. I'm not sure if that's national or Queensland. I'm pretty sure that might be Queensland, but it's around 1% nationally. This is record low territory. We've never had occupancy vacancy rates so damn low, which means that there are people who cannot get houses. Rents are exorbitant. The housing prices are very high. And what we can see now is this is why so many people in Queensland are living in tents, in cars, on the street, under bridges, in caravans. They're being moved around. This is Cairns, Townsville, Gladstone, Bundaberg, Rockhampton. It's all up and down the east coast of Queensland. And it's in Brisbane. I can take you outside here, outside my office, which is in the city. I'm really in the city, but I'm in the office today. And I can take you outside and just walk a few hundred meters. And on the banks of the river, you'll find people in... Okay, Pixelate Me, I love your name. You nailed it. The working poor. These are not hobos. These are not hippies. These are working families. Working families. They can't find a bloody house. And just imagine, with the way taxation is, inflation is, childcare is, 2 parents are working. And Daniel from Flagstone, who I interviewed in a podcast, which we'll be releasing soon, he's become a volunteer helping the homeless around the country, around Queensland, around southeast Queensland. He says that what's happening is some of the councils have rangers, and according to Daniel, some of the rangers can find kids in cars waiting for their parents to come home after work, and because they're by themselves, they're taken, and the parents are deemed not fit to have custody of the children, and the children are removed. So people cannot find house. They might lose their kids. And apparently that's happened. Why? Why are people living in tents? Queensland, from memory, is about four and a half times the area of California. California by itself is the 6th largest economy in the world. If it was a country, it would be the 6th largest economy in the world after America, China, Japan, Germany. I can't remember who the next one is. Probably the United Kingdom, of course, Britain. Then it comes California. We have got more land than California. We've got wonderful source of rainfall in the north, just like California has in Nevada, which they use. They've turned desert in California into wonderful, fertile agricultural areas. You can buy grapes from California in our supermarkets. You can find dates grown in California in our supermarkets. You can find so many products, food products. You look at once they got the economy going on agriculture, then they got it going on high tech. They got it going on manufacturing. Los Angeles is one of the biggest manufacturing centers in the United States. Used to be anyway. I'm sure it still is. So they turned California desert into fertile land, and they turned California itself into a very, very productive and wealthy state. Of course, the woke bastards running the country, running the state now, destroying that. But anyway, that's a matter of politics. Australia is the world's richest country when it comes to minerals, especially per person. And Queensland is one of the richest states. WA is the richest state at the moment because of the massive gas reserves, which we're getting bugger all for, by the way, as Pauline and I have said, iron ore, etc. But sometimes the largest value export from Australia is Queensland's coal. So we've got coal, we've got tourism, Great Barrier Reef, we've got universities, which when they're not going woke, are educating people from all over the world. We've got so many resources here. We've got a phenomenally productive agricultural sector, crops, livestock, you name it, we've got it. We've got almost an equatorial climate up in northern Cape York. We've got tropical climate. We've got temperate climate. We've got desert in the west. We've got lush rainforests in the east. We've got plenty of water if we actually used it properly and diverted it around the country, so around the state. So we've got this huge, and we've got so many minerals, rare earth minerals. We've got copper, gold, silver, lead, zinc, tin. We've got these minerals that are essential for human progress. We've got the best quality coking coal in the world and the best quality steaming coal in the world for power generation, coking for making steel. We've got enormous potential in the Project Iron Boomerang, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we've got this wealth. And yet we've got people living in bloody tents. Not just a few, thousands of people living in tents. Families living in tents, working families living in tents. And why? I'll tell you why. It's the same reason that Morrison had. Labor Party right now is scared of being the government that is in charge when they go into a recession. And right now, people don't realize this, but for some time we have been in a per capita recession, which means that per person, our economic growth is decreasing. We are going backwards. We're negative growth. We're shrinking as an economy per person. So if you don't do anything to inflate the gross domestic product, we would have 2 quarters in a row of negative growth for the country. And so what they're doing is they're bringing in massive quantities of immigrants to pump up the gross domestic product and keep us just barely above the above negative growth. So what they're doing is dishonestly bringing people in, causing inhuman catastrophe in people's accommodation. That's why they're doing this. They do not give a damn about the people of Queensland and Australia. So the real issue here is, as in so many issues with Morrison's government, as in so many issues with the Albanese government, the real issue is trust. These buggers keep covering things up, keep telling lies about what's going on. And they don't acknowledge the truth. The truth is, the only reason the federal budget is in surplus is because of iron ore prices and coal prices. That's all. That's the only, agricultural prices have been wonderful. So Labor, and they never once acknowledged it. I call them up on it and call them out on it. They've never once acknowledged the primary production industries, coal, mining, iron ore, and agriculture have kept this country afloat so far as the budget surplus is concerned. And they are trying to destroy this country. Why? Because the people have lost control. The people are the head of our country, head of our constitution. I've gone into that in the past. I'll go into it again in the future sometime. But the people have lost control. No longer, the people are, as part of the constitution, are in charge of this country. But the two parties, the duopoly, the uni party, Labor and Liberal, have hoodwinked the people for so many decades now. We have got to do something about that. We've got to do something different. We can't keep relying upon the mouthpiece misery media, the globalists that are owned by globalists. We have got to continue using the new people's media. We've got to educate people, share what you know about the government, Labor and Liberal, the uni party. If we keep going as we're going, we're going to be in a hell of a mess, much, much worse. There's a little thing, if I see if I can find it here. Yeah, here it is. Ayn Rand wrote this, what I'm about to quote. Ayn Rand from Atlas Shrugged in 1957. She said, quote, "When you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing. When you see that money is flowing to those who deal, not in goods, but in favors. When you see that men get richer by graft and by pull than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you. When you see corruption being rewarded and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. You may know that your society is doomed. This country is doomed unless we do things differently. We all have a choice. More of the same with the Liberal Labor Uni Party, pushing World Economic Forum and UN policies, or we can do something different and we can vote for someone other than the Uni Party. The Uni Party has no choice. Labor and Liberal are the same. We need to do something different. That way we will have a different outcome on our country. When that something different is to vote for one nation. So I'm going to be partisan, political right now. I'm not hiding anymore. This is desperate straits for our country. When you have got governments protecting their damn backside because they've failed on the economy. Who's driven up energy prices? Labor and Liberal. The Liberals have introduced every major climate and energy policy. Every major climate and energy policy. And Labor has come along and ramped it up. I can go through that. I've had a session on that in the past. Energy, stealing of property rights, stealing of water rights and water allocations, destruction of the healthcare system as a result of COVID, state and federal, Labor and Liberal. Basic things, education has gone woke, transgender issues, mutilating children when they're just going through adolescence. I mean, these are the things. They're destroying individuals, they're destroying families, they're destroying our country. But you have a choice. Please do something different. So at the conference in Albury on the weekend, it was entitled, there are three parts of the conference, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the Sunday session was Big Ideas. And they invited me to talk about Project Iron Boomerang. Project Iron Boomerang, I'll just check out, gosh, we're going quickly through time, aren't we? Project Iron Boomerang is the building of a steel railway line across the continent from the coking coal or steel-making coal in Moranbah, the Bowen Basin, through to the iron ore fields in Western Australia and the Pilbara. And what they would do is load trains carrying iron ore from Western Australia through to Moranbah in the east in Queensland, and then backload, rather than have empty train, they'd backload with coal to steel mills in the Pilbara. So we'd have steel mills in the Pilbara, steel mills in Moranbah, Abbott Point. Then instead of exporting iron ore and dirt and coal, we would export steel slabs, finished steel slabs. And these steel slabs are 4.2 meters wide, not the standard 2.8 meters wide, so which drastically reduce the number of welds and rivets in shipbuilding. So we would have an edge on shipbuilding. We could restore our shipbuilding industry, which we had and which has been destroyed. It would make Australia one of the best quality producers of steel and the lowest price producers of steel, while still pumping out fair wages to people because of the advantage. At the moment, think about it. Oh, and by the way, if you're one of these green lunatics, I don't think they'll be watching me, but anyway, if you're a green lunatic and you believe in this crap and this fraud about carbon dioxide being bad, then you've got to get on board with the Iron Boomerang, because instead of exporting iron ore from Western Australia, I think we exported nearly 1 billion tonnes last year. Instead of exporting, and 40% of that is dirt, by the way. It's carted for no reason. And they burn 200 tonnes of bunker oil per day fueling these ships. Think of all that carbon dioxide that it produces. And then coming back down empty at 100 tonnes a day. All of that would be removed. So I don't think there's anything wrong with carbon dioxide. The scientific facts show that there's nothing wrong with carbon dioxide. It's a wonderful blessing. And we can't affect the levels in the atmosphere anyway, because that's another story, but I can cover that one day. So we would eliminate all of that carbon dioxide for the Greens. Same with the coking coal exported from the east, from Queensland. We instead of exporting coal and then backloading ships empty, we would export finished product. And the value added from that is worth $100 billion a year. A year. The total cost of the investment, and we've got, when I say we, the project organisers have got foreign and Australian finance interested, very much interested. We've got some major international steel companies in Japan, Korea, possibly Taiwan, India, Indonesia, China, all interested in taking part, funding it. The whole thing can be funded just with investors' money, no government money. All it needs is 2 commitments from the government. One commitment being legislation to make sure that no one will undermine it, and they'll give it certainty and so they can go ahead. Or if they don't want to give legislation, then if the federal government did the feasibility study, which is only 300 million out of a project cost of 100 billion for the first stage. But the benefits are enormous. And then there are so many byproducts from the steelmaking process with modern steel mills. That's just enormous. Yeah, Richard Brands. I'm just looking at some of the comments too. Yeah, Phoenix Starborn, we need CO2. There's this amazing thing called a tree that grows itself, turns carbon into breathable air. Wonderful, wonderful. That's the facts. So anyway, Project Iron Boomerang, huge potential. And listen to this one. If we don't get you on the reduction in carbon dioxide, think about this. The whole of the north of Australia would be opened up. Now, I was on a Senate inquiry into northern development. The key issues in the northern development are land title. Yeah, we gave native title, but only to a handful of people who've controlled the rest. But also water, transport, logistics, communication. These are the things that are holding back the development of the north. We have got enormous potential in the north. Western Australia, north. Northern Territory, Queensland, north. With this railway line, it would open up the whole lot. It would enable passenger and freight trains to take goods and people, tourists, to inland communities. It would enable their production of agriculture, cattle, for example, to come out and go to the world. So it would connect Central Australia, Northern Australia with the world and bring the world to those places and take those places to the world. We would have cattle, for example, on transport in roads, because cattle have to shift around as the truck is bumping up and down and around corners, dirt roads. They lose about 15% of their weight while they travel because of the physical stress. So that would be cut back to 5% by using rail. So enormously profitable for Aboriginal industries in agriculture in Northern Australia. We'd also have internet across the fibre optic internet along the whole of the railway line. And a water pipeline has been envisaged to come along the whole pipeline from the Ord River scheme right through to the east to get water to all the Aboriginal and other communities in remote central and northern Australia. So it would be a huge boon to people living in isolated communities in the centre. What else can I mention? That'll do for now. I'll look at a couple of comments. Oh, Gonzo, you're right up my alley. CO2 is not a greenhouse gas. You're absolutely correct. It has a greater mass and a greater specific gravity than O2 and N2, and therefore the very insignificant amount in our atmosphere sinks and accumulates. Yeah, it is certainly not completely intermixed. Build the rail line north. Yeah, okay. Right, so that's Project Iron Boomerang. I discussed that and introduced that into the Parliament in a motion last year. Was it last year or the year before? That led to an inquiry that I moved a motion to have an inquiry. The Senate had an inquiry. The Senate inquiry recommended that it go to the next step, which is consideration by Infrastructure Australia. I asked Infrastructure Australia in Senate estimates what they're doing about it. About what? Project Iron Boomerang. What's Project Iron Boomerang? We find out that the Minister for Infrastructure has to nominate the project. We had Labor members in the Senate on the inquiry. We recommended that it be taken to the next stage. Labor's just sitting on it. Just sitting on it. And we've got people in tents, cars, under bridges. This is a huge visionary project. It's not my idea. It was developed 40 years ago by people in Western Australia, but it's just been sat on. We just need people with vision in government to put it forward. We've got the international financiers, the Australian financiers, ready to go. So what we just need is government will. And yet the government seems to be holding this country back. So there were other big ideas discussed as well. I want to commend Anthony Dillon, Warren Mundine, who you know about, and Gary Johns, who's a former Keating government minister, I think. They formed a panel at the Big Ideas Conference on how to improve the lives of Aboriginals. And you know what they mentioned? All three of them. mentioned that 80% of Aboriginals in this country are just like whites, Europeans. They're doing very well, thank you very much. They've got a house, they've got a car, they've got a job. They're doing very, very well. And that's the majority of them, 80% of them. The other 20% are in remote communities. And all three of them also agreed on this next point. The remote communities, some of the regional communities, the Aboriginal are held back by the Aboriginal industry, which is controlling land access. You know, we handed back native title, which supposedly a lot of people in the cities think, well, that's giving the land back to the Aboriginals. That's rubbish. It did not. It gave land back to land councils, which some of them are run by despots, control freaks, who do prevent access to the Aboriginals in the community to land. So all we want, and Pauline Hanson has been saying this from the day one of her time in Parliament, all we want is for Aboriginals to be given the same treatment as white people. Stop the racism that treats Aboriginals as separate. Stop the paternalism and the patronising approach to keeping Aboriginal people down. Stop the despotic Aboriginal land councils. Some of them are very despotic, controlling Aboriginals, suppressing Aboriginals. The number one issue across the north, I mentioned a few a minute ago, energy, transport, communications. The number one issue across the north is land title. Whites can't get it, and Aboriginals can't get it because it's under central land. It's under land councils, and so that means an Aboriginal who wants to invest in a small business can't get land. Who wants to own and build and own and be responsible for his or her own house cannot get it. They cannot get the things that you and I can get, and that is the opportunity to own a house. So these are the things. And we had Jo Nova. I don't know if you know Jo Nova. She is an Australian scientist who's a world-class communicator. She won awards for many, many years, having the best blog in the world on climate and science. She spoke about the destruction of our Australian society, industry, regional lands, rainforests due to wind turbines and solar panels being installed willy-nilly everywhere. And then the massive amount of transmission lines needed from these scattered wind and solar generators and the destruction. And she talked about the bloody cost. The cost of this is phenomenal. And she also talked about known studies that have said we don't have the minerals anywhere in the world to be able to build all of this. Nowhere in the world. We haven't got the capacity. And that includes copper. We'd have to increase copper dramatically by hundreds of times to do this, plus the rare earth minerals. It's physically impossible. But meanwhile, we've got the Minister for Misery, Chris Bowen, the Minister for Energy, going ahead with this at a great rate of knots. And what we're doing is driving the cost of electricity up because of these stupid plans. So what were some of the other highlights? Oh, okay, I'll get on to another topic now. The second day of the conference, the 3-day conference, the first day was the Friedman Society, which is about freedom, libertarian philosophy, and that was wonderful. John Humphreys, who co-founded the Libertarian Party, he was there. He was the MC for the day. Wonderful discussions about freedom, about free enterprise. The second day was Church and State, which I want to talk about. The third day was the big ideas. Church and State. I've mentioned very, very proudly, and I really am very proud to know Dave Pellow, who's the organizer of Church and State, and I've attended and spoken at their conferences in the past. I attended one just a few weeks ago here in Brisbane. Didn't speak at it, but I attended it. And people said, why are you going to Church and State? There's a separation of Church and State. The separation of Church and State is not as it seems, but it stops political interference from the state in churches. In other words, you have freedom of religion. And so that is very, very important. But the reason why Dave Pellow calls his conferences Church and State is to reawaken Christians to stop being woke, to stop being asleep, and to let this wool be pulled over our eyes. You know, I'm well into my 60s, and I've done a fair bit of reading in my life. I've done a lot of traveling in my life. I thought I'm pretty switched on, pretty aware. But, you know, some of the most important things we sometimes miss as humans. You know, the Jewish people, and that's not the same thing as the government of Israel or Hamas or anything like that. That's nothing to do with that. The Jewish people all over the world, been scattered all over the world, persecuted, but the Jewish people started the roots of values-based religion, and then from that sprang Christianity, and then based upon the teachings and the life and the example of Christ, who introduced to us true forgiveness, which is the same thing as love. And Christianity introduced the love of truth, and truth being a value. Think about it. Christianity teaches truth. I know there are many Christians. Look at Scott Morrison. I don't believe he's a Christian. Kevin Rudd, they're not Christians in their behavior. But a true Christian tells the truth, values the truth. And from that comes remarkable things. The whole of Western civilization started before Christ with the Greeks, etc., philosophers, but it really flourished after Christianity started taking root. That's when it really flourished, because of love of truth and the love of fellow human beings. Yes, and there have been some terrible people in the name of Christianity. Look what Greg Hunt did to the use of COVID injections. Scott Morrison did, the state premiers did, and this is a Christian country. Which reminds me, God is mentioned in the first paragraph, the first sentence of our Constitution. We are a Christian-based Constitution. And that's wonderful because of the values of Christianity. But with that truth, then came the scientific process. Objectivity, truth, data. Prior to the scientific process, we used to have the people with the biggest financial muscles, the most financial power, the most security guards, the ownership of the land, the ownership of religions. And I mean ownership of religions, including Christianity, they bought off. These were the people who kept the rest of the population in fear. With the scientific revolution, the scientific process, we had a huge rise in objectivism, I've forgotten the word, objective understanding of things. And rather than the most powerful people making the decisions, we had data making decisions. And that freed up people. And that was remarkable for freedom. So we had Christ creating the value of truth. We had scientists coming along and creating objective truth based on data. And that freed up people. And that led to the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution led to the birth of the middle class. You know, up until 170 years ago, 1850, many people around the world were scratching in the dirt for their next meal. And that was after millennia. Thousands and tens of thousands of years scratching in the dirt, vulnerable to famine. And then we suddenly started becoming liberated from being under nature's control. And we still respect nature, but what happened was, in the last 170 years, we have left a lot of the famines and the misery behind, the vulnerability to nature. We've left that behind. And that's created the middle class. And the middle class has created freedom. And now we have Western civilization under threat. The very thing that gave us our human progress is under threat. The Greeks started, as I said, United Kingdom really pushed liberty. Slaves were freed under the United Kingdom because they realized that not only is it immoral to control another man like that, another person like that, it is actually not productive to have slaves. Your efficiency of your economy goes down when you treat people badly. So Western civilization. And that's what the major pushes around the world are, from the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, to put humanity down again and put under control and get them back to feudalism and serfs, so that we are under control. That's what they want. The elitists did not like the fact that the middle class sprang up and we had freedom. So they want us back in our box. They want us under control again. And now they're using methods that are not really seen by people. The previous rulers, the previous elitists, they could hold a gun to people's head, shoot someone. That's a very clear sign of control. Nowadays, they indoctrinate children from 3 years of age onwards, from kindergarten. They indoctrinate people. So people don't even know they're under control once they're 50 years of age, and they're just so used to this woke indoctrination. So what we're in a fight for restoring Christian values, especially the truth, scientific process, freedom, and the middle class, in which people are free to engage in business, engage in whatever choice of industry they want to be employed in or to start. That's what's under stress, under attack. And a future live stream, I was sitting there thinking, yes, Aussie's saying it has been that way since the 1980s. Correct. It's actually since 1944 with the formation of the UN, Aussie. I was making a note of some of the key ideas that came up at the conference in Albury last week. And I want to single out Topher Field for organising that conference. He had so many volunteers helping him. Thank the volunteers. I thank the speakers who came, many at their own cost. I want to thank Dave Pello. I want to single out Stephen Shavira, who's an academic, but he's a decent academic. He's not a woke academic. And that man is truly blessed with the thinking capabilities and speaking capabilities. Learned so much from him. But I made notes of some of the observations and the big ideas, and I'll share them with you. I thought I had them with me, but I don't, so I'll have to get them from home. I want to point out just a few more points, and then I'll turn it open to questions. Geez, it's 1:45 already. Gee, I'm running slow. If you look at the World Economic Forum, Greenpeace, the Greens, the Teals, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, World Wildlife Fund, and all these other globalist organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, which happens to control our treasury, in case you didn't know, and the World Bank, so many of these other inhuman organizations. If you look below their lies and argument for what they want us to do and their attempts to control us, there's a fundamental underlying assumption, and that is that we need to protect our planet. Now, I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but that's what they're justifying all of their policies on, protecting the planet. Whereas I think that's the wrong assumption. The assumption we should be working on, what do we need to do for humans to flourish? Now think about that. Instead of protect the planet, work on what we need to do to get humans to flourish. That's what took us out of the Dark Ages. That's what took us out of bondage to nature, and that's what gave us our industrial and middle class. What the globalists are doing is trying to say it's either humans or the environment. That's why they're saying protect the planet. That's the underlying assumption beneath their assumption. Humans or the environment. And that is complete rubbish. Always you'll find in the globalists an either or, polarization, division, separation. And if you disagree with them, you're pilloried, you're smashed, you're disregarded. But if you think about it, with so many people on the planet, human industry and scientific progress, real science, means that we understand the environment and we know how to protect it. Think about someone who's in Africa or in an undeveloped country in Asia. Look, they're so busy trying to get their next mouthful for their kids, the next meal for their kids. They'll go and shit in the creek. They don't care about it. You know, I can understand that because they're so busy just trying to get the next meal. But when you get more and more civilized in terms of industrialized, you're actually decreasing your impact on the environment, your footprint, because there's so much cleanliness. You know, the use of coal, oil, and gas, the hydrocarbon fuels. 150 years ago before the Industrial Revolution, 170 years ago before the Industrial Revolution, if you wanted light at night, you used whale oil. Some places you use gas, but gas was in its early days. That requires killing whales. If you wanted to cook food, if you wanted to be warm in the wintertime in Europe and North America and Canada, even parts of Australia, you burnt timber. You chopped down trees. So we killed whales and killed trees. Along came coal, oil, and gas. We didn't have to kill whales. We didn't have to kill trees. So the best friend of the whales, the best friend of the forests is coal, oil, and natural gas, the hydrocarbon fuels that the UN, the World Economic Forum, are demonizing with lies about climate. Gosh, there's so many things you can talk about. I could just keep on track. So what I'm saying is that Václav Klaus, president of the Czech Republic a few years ago, wrote this book. And in it, he's a famous economist, a very strong and accurate economist. He said that when a country develops industrially and economically and gets to the point of about $8,000, $7,000 US per annum in per capita income, remarkable things happen. People go on holidays, they have vacation, and they then are able to see and experience any pollution, and they don't like it because humans care for the planet. And so when countries become civilized, they start dealing with pollution. And they also become more educated and they understand what causes pollution. And so they cut it back. People don't like pollution. So what happens is environment separate from it's humans dependent on nature and nature health dependent upon humans. Human flourishing is the thing we should be pushing. The subtle thing underneath the Greens is that they're saying protect the planet, choke humans. So I'd encourage people to just think about the underlying assumption behind what the Greens are feeding our children, what the politicians are feeding our children. I've used science. I've chased down the corruption of organisations, pushing the corruption of science, and I've chased down the motivations. And I'd urge everyone to go beneath what we see on the surface, and you'll find corruption in their science being distorted, and that's what these underlying assumptions are based on, lies. I'll just get on a couple of other things. Vaping, the government has throttled back vaping yet again. Yet wherever there's vaping is allowed, legal in the country, then you'll find that the smoking, the number of people quitting smoking is increasing. People quit smoking when they get their nicotine addiction fulfilled by vaping. Vaping is far, far healthier. Now, I'm not going to take nicotine anyway, but I know smokers want vaping so that they can quit smoking. In Australia, our smoking rates are pretty much flat. Countries with vaping, smoking rates are going down dramatically. United Kingdom, for example, and others. So wherever it's regulated, smokers actually quit. So why is Labor making it hard for vapes? Because they want to protect their mates in the quit smoking industry. Quit smoking in this country has been given $500 million over the last 4 years. $500 million. That's why they don't want vaping, because vaping actually quits smoking. And I've got a question. I won't go into it now, but medicinal cannabis is a wonderful, wonderful treatment. It's not for everyone, but the side effects are negligible, even in the people that don't find it useful. But the majority of people who try medicinal cannabis say it's wonderful, and there are no side effects of note. So, and it's spectacularly successful across so many different diseases. I've been quite stunned by it. My office, Pauline Hanson's been pushing it for many, many years as an issue. I've been very much, once I did the work on it and some of my staff did the research, we've been pushing medicinal cannabis. But I've said, and this is the question I'm getting to, I've said for people, look, lay off on the recreational demands for recreational use of cannabis, because the majority of Australians aren't ready for that, and we haven't done the research on it. But recently, I was at a Senate inquiry here in Brisbane on a bill to legalise cannabis, and it included recreational cannabis or smoking of cannabis. And I've always been opposed to that, and I've said, for now anyway, keep it separate. Don't scare the people. Let's just get medicinal cannabis in properly regulated, because if you don't regulate it, then you can't control the quality, ensure the quality of it. Now, there were maybe 3 or 4 people, including 2 amazing women who gave witnesses, who were witnesses in the inquiry here in Brisbane. One of them got into medicinal cannabis for a husband who had a terminally, prognosis was terminal cancer, and they tried everything and nothing worked. And she started doing a research on medicinal cannabis. He was fine. Some of the other treatments worked, and medicinal cannabis enabled him to use those other treatments. I think that was the story. But anyway, she did her research, and she said the problem with banning all cannabis, including recreational cannabis, is that it puts people into what do they call it? The criminal industry, so that they get arrested for small quantities of cannabis. They then get part of the criminal justice system. They then get branded. They lose their job, and they're on a downward spiral. What they were saying, and it was quite compelling evidence, and I asked a number of questions of them. They were very, very impressive women. It caused me to really think. And they said that by legalizing it, decriminalizing it, you then take the heat off people. She said that, and they implied that there were less problems with recreational use of cannabis than the recreational use of alcohol. That's a pretty hard argument to beat. So I just wondered if you wanted to leave your comments, please, because I'm genuinely open. I'm not asking because I'm trying to sow things or sow seeds for the future or put blocks up to it. I'm just questioning my original stance of being against recreational, just focusing on the medicinal and get it through first and then deal with it. So I'd just be very interested in your views. I know some people want to grow their own. Even the people who are very strong advocates for recreational use have got some problems with that, because growing your own may be okay, but an unregulated market enables contaminants to be in it. So that it needs to be regulated in some way so we can protect people. So I'm not in favour of regulation quite often, but recreational use of cannabis would need to be regulated. But yeah, someone's saying here, no drugs are good. Other one's saying, yes, let us grow let us grow recreational cannabis. Cannabis is safer than lettuce. Yeah, so a lot of research says. Yes, Nicholas, we have a top-down control system, greed and manipulation. People, they say nicotine is good for Parkinson's and more. That is why it's a controlled substance. Smokers don't want to poison themselves. It's like coffee. If people are stupid enough, let them have it. If I buy a bottle of booze and it's bad, my problem. Yep, there are so many different views, but I'd appreciate, just keep them coming. Once the podcast's finished, you can keep them coming. Yeah, it's an issue that I think is worth exploring. Anyway, any questions before we wrap up? I've been going for just on an hour. Any questions? Shadow Man. Couldn't see it. Hi, Malcolm. Is it possible to see a copy of contract signed by Australia regarding vaccine and agreement to conditions accepted by previous government? Julie, thank you for your question. You're a taxpayer, I assume. Even if you're not, you're impacted by the government's mismanagement and deceit around COVID. The answer is no. I've asked that question. The answer is no. Liberal senators have asked that question. The answer is no. When I first asked the question, I wanted a contract because I wanted to see the copy of the contract and the conditions, because they're taking our money as taxpayers and giving Big Pharma $8 billion. I'm starting to get angry again. And I don't get angry very easily, but this topic gets me because it's just been inhuman. $8 billion a year of taxpayer money for, what was it now? 11 doses of this untested, well, largely untested, certainly not tested in Australia, this injection. 11 doses each. Why were they thinking of buying so much with a shelf life on it? So I wanted the contracts. The Morrison government said, no, you can't have the contracts. Others asked for the contract. Morrison government said, no, you can't have the contract. When the Liberal government got tossed out and replaced by the Albanese Labor government, some of the Liberals asked for copies of the contract. And the whole of the Liberal Nationals supported them, and we supported them. And the Labor government said, no, you can't have them. Why the cover-up from our own governments? So the answer to your question, Julie, is no. I see, yes, it is a photo of Muhammad Ali on my shelf. He was a great man. And what does it say? He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. You have to take risks. Calculated risks, get the data, and take risks. Yes, he was a very good man. He was pilloried by the mainstream media, the mouthpiece media at the time, but now is one of the most respected humans ever. Any more questions? Barbara Lockhart, petrol is up at the moment in Queensland, up to $2 and more. I understand that my wife went to Costco in Ipswich and she saved something like 45 cents a litre. 45 cents a litre. So it varies so much. You know, we have huge reserves of gas off the Northwest Shelf. We export them for a pittance. Qatar is another big exporter of natural gas, and it gets so much more for its natural gas than we do. The Japanese get more revenue from our gas than we do. They charge an import of our natural gas into Japan. They levy $3 billion. We don't get anything like that. So that was the deal done with the multinationals under John Howard's government. It was then perpetuated by Bob Hawke's Labor government. And Pauline's been pushing for this, and I've joined her in pushing for it, a pipeline across from the Northwest Shelf to Brisbane, to Sydney, to Adelaide, to Melbourne. We could have petrol refineries because you can make liquid fuels, petrol and diesel, out of our gas. That's a fact. And we could be independent on our fuel. Instead, we have to import it now. So it's a tragedy. We're not getting paid for it. Multi-Shizmo, I voted Liberal since I was 18. Now I'll never vote for them again. You know, mate, I agree with you, and I'm very pleased to hear that. I voted mainly for the Liberal Party, once for the Labor Party, because I didn't like the weak, gutless Liberal opposition leader at the time, Peacock, I think. But I largely voted Liberal. I haven't voted for Liberal at all since early 2000s, I think. I voted for the small parties, independents, and of course, once I became aware of One Nation, I've always put them first. Malcolm, you do it tough at question time against it. Oh, that one's gone. Hang on, we'll get it back. Malcolm, you do it tough at question time against the two major parties. They continuously dodge the truth. How are you feeling? It's a hard fight. I don't look at it as a fight. Look at it as a challenge. You know, when I was in managing coal mines and helping people run their own businesses after managing coal mines and being an executive in the coal industry, I got things done through other people. You know, just by leading people properly, and you could set a plan, set a target, and just listen to people and let them contribute, because people love to work. They love to contribute. They love to be heard. And you knock it off, and you just bang, 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 steps to the plan, implement the plan, and away you go. With politics, there's just so much bullshit. It's being in Canberra. It's like swimming in treacle. It's sapping, but I'm starting to work out that it's not things that happen quickly. Yes, Joe, Canberra Parliament needs a major clean out. None of them govern for the people. Well, a couple of us do, but majority, I agree with you. What we have to do is recognise there are so many ways to skin a cat. So when we ask questions in question time, you'll notice my questions are much shorter than most people's. I might set it up in the first question with a few data and facts and figures, and then the second and third questions are very, very short usually, much shorter than others. Because if you give them too much in a question, they go off on one of those things, and they just bullshit. They just waffle. So what you've got to do is make sure the question is very tight, and then it becomes obvious. People at home can see them waffle. Now, Murray Watt answers questions with a lot of waffle. All the Labor Party do, and a lot of the Liberals did too. Simon Birmingham was notorious, now the current Liberal Party leader in the Senate. When he was in the government, he was notorious bullshitter for and waffler. But they're smug in their arrogance because they think you can't see it. They think you can't see it, and they think you've got us. They've got you conned and us conned. We are letting them talk. Sometimes I interrupt and I hold them accountable, but majority of times I let them go because it shows how little they know, and it shows how much they're trying to cover up. They're revealing themselves. Senate estimates. Sometimes I've got some very, very good staff in my team. Senate estimates. We ask questions. And ask questions at every Senate estimates for 3 years, and after the third year, one of the questions we asked in the very first session, 3 sessions a year, 9 sessions earlier, and that we trapped them in a lie 9 sessions later. Sometimes we use Senate estimates and question time to set them up, and they fall for the trap. Sometimes we just let them talk so that people can see what they're dealing with. You're paying these taxes. Sometimes we get answers. Sometimes we trap them in ways that they have to give us answers in another format later on. There are many, many things going on. You can't do it directly because there's so much dishonesty in politics. You can't do it directly sometimes. We try to be direct. We try to set an example in being respectful and courteous. We are persistent, but it's a different way of working. You've got to think about where they'll be in a few months' time or a few years' time. So we've set them up with questions on housing. We'll ask another ripper in May around budget time if we can get it. So it's not really tough. It's we've got a strategy. For Australia to make steel, we need cheap energy. For all industry, you must have cheap energy. Mark, you just nailed it. The number one factor that has driven our remarkable human progress in the last 170 years of the Industrial Revolution is ever declining costs of energy. In real terms, the unit cost of electricity has decreased until John Howard got into power. And when you have decreasing costs of energy, decreasing price of energy, you've basically got slaves working for you. They're called washing machines, lathes, industrial plants, trucks, cars, dishwashers, all of these slaves working for us. And the cheaper you make energy, the more slaves you can have. And the cheaper you make energy, the more productive your economy. When you're more productive, you generate wealth. And when you generate wealth, you generate prosperity. That's why, as a result of coal, oil, and natural gas, the main providers of energy, hydrocarbon fuels, that's why we've got such a higher standard of living now. But when John Howard reversed the decline of energy prices and artificially increased energy prices, we have been in Australia, we've gone from amongst the cheapest electricity in the world to amongst the most expensive. Just think, you could be in South Australia, then you're paying the highest prices in Australia. And then your human progress declines and sometimes reverses. Standard of living is all about energy. It's all about energy. And we are shooting ourselves in the head. We are exporting our coal to China. They're producing 8.5 times the coal that we produce. 8.5 times. We produce 560 million tonnes a year roughly. They produce 4.5 billion tonnes a year. And they're wanting to get to 5 billion. Billion. We give them our coking coal. They make steel out of it, put it in wind turbines. We subsidise them to do it. They use coal to make solar panels. We subsidise them to do it. We subsidise them to ship them to Australia, to install them. and that's subsidies, and then we subsidise them to run the wind turbines and solar panels. They're a far higher cost of electricity, so we're subsidising them to destroy our industry. We've got farmers in the north, the middle of Queensland, the south of Queensland, who refused during the last drought to plant fodder crops that were so essential during a drought because the cost of electricity to pump water for fodder crops was too high. This is insane. And it's all done for a lie. Pam, watching from Atherton, thank you very much. What a lovely town you've got. We were just there a couple of months ago. How do we stop all this immigration? We don't have enough housing for these people. Good, you've got it. Most tradies are working on infrastructure projects. Pull back infrastructure spending and they will all go back to their trade jobs. Actually, infrastructure spending is not that big, unless you're talking about roads, and it's still not big, Joe. What we need to do is get government out of building houses. We've got the government, they just do things to look good, not do good. They had headlines, they captured headlines, the Labor government, with $10 billion for a housing future fund. What people weren't clear about was that the $10 billion was the amount they put into the future fund, and it sits there invested in other industries and other investments, and then the return from that $10 billion is invested in housing. The return. So if it's negative return, and sometimes it is, we get money going out of building houses. So it is a complete lie. It's not $10 billion of housing. It's $10 billion in a fund that's invested, and the investments go. And they created 3 different bureaucratic organisations to manage this bullshit. All we need to do is cut the regulations to free up the land for houses. I ran an economic summit when I was in the Senate in 2017, and we had top economists from around the world, around Australia there. And one of them pointed out that the cost of building a house in Houston, Texas, and Sydney, Australia, is roughly the same. The differences were largely in land prices and taxes. We need to free up land that's being artificially held back by UN policies put in place by the federal government, the state government, and local councils. Free up artificially ridiculous environmental regulations that are raising the cost of developing land. And we need to free up tradies, free up the tax system, and we need to reduce the cost of energy that's being blown up by wind turbines and solar panels subsidies. So these are the basics. Look, it's getting back to basics, Joe. It's getting back to basics. We need to invest in more infrastructure properly, productive infrastructure. That's not inflationary. We need to invest in dams. We need to invest in railway lines. We need to invest in the Project Iron Boomerang, for example, but that doesn't need government investment. Need to invest in ports. There's a guy in the Gold Coast who runs a company. They've done it. They've built it in Gulf of Carpentaria up north, and they're talking about it in South Australia, and I think they've done something in Western Australia. They can build a port as many as you want in Queensland to reduce the cost of exporting our agricultural product and our mining product. They're actually being used in the mining industry now. We need to invest in infrastructure to increase the productive capacity, and that will increase the productivity of our resources and our people. So I don't think we should cut back on infrastructure. Pauline and I have been saying we need to do more of it. We need to build that gas pipeline from the west to the east. So plenty of... Okay, here's someone, I am that, says cannabis is a natural medicine, should not be regulated. Much better for you than alcohol. Where is it? Regulation only turns into a way for the cronies to hike prices. Everyone should be allowed 10 plants. Well, some of the people pushing this would disagree with you about that many in home growing. But I hear your argument. Thank you for making a comment. It adds to the list. Do you have a copy of Bowen's transition to renewables plan with costings? Mate, you can get the costings. They're all based on GenCost from the CSIRO, which is a bunch of lies. What they're saying there is they have made a number of false assumptions, which is basically fraud. GenCost from the CSIRO is fraud. They have made assumptions that make coal look bad and raise the cost artificially of coal. They've made assumptions that make nuclear look bad. They've made assumptions that that make wind turbines and solar panels look good. One of the things they've done is they've said in 2030, all the transmission lines, the installations that we build from now till then, 2030, they'll be in place, so they're a sunk cost. In other words, you don't add them to the cost of solar and wind, which is complete rubbish. That's why solar and wind, according to the CSIRO, are cheap. But they're not cheap. The actual costs of delivering solar, wind, coal show that coal is far, far cheaper. It is far more reliable. We are turning our electricity grid, which is the most important asset we have, apart from our water grid, into something that's dependent on weather. That's one of the things that the Industrial Revolution took us away from, dependency of our industry, of our food production on weather. Now we're going back to being dependent on weather. It's bloody insane. So Bowen's costings are complete rubbish. Civil war is what the WHO and UN want, correct? Pixelate me again. Who was the federal spy? Asking for a friend. Hey, I asked questions and couldn't get an answer. I asked official questions in question time and couldn't get an answer. We don't know. Was it Paul Keating? Was it Bob Carr? Was it Sam Dastyari? I've heard a couple of others I can't remember. Who knows? But don't you think it's important that we know? Even if the Senate was sworn to secrecy on it. But I think the people should know. That's why I asked the question publicly and openly. I'm going to have to wind up because we've got a couple of our staff that need me to do a few things before they go home for the weekend. And yeah, there she is nodding. I can see you. I see nothing. Ex-Qantas pilot testimony was riveting. Hood, that's Graham Hood. Hood, I can tell you, mate, he is one really impressive individual. He's 70 years of age. He's going around the country listening to people. Well, you saw my introduction. I established his credibility for him. But Hoodie's already established his credibility with people that know him. He's wonderful. It was fantastic. But you know what? That terms of reference inquiry that my motion got to get the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee to develop the terms of reference for a possible future Royal Commission, that has been fantastic. Excuse me, we had 19 witnesses on the first day. We had, I'm guessing, 10, 15, whatever the number of witnesses on the second day. Every single witness was not just positive about a Royal Commission, they were enthusiastically positive about a Royal Commission. They all want it, and they want it very, very powerfully. Now, I want to commend Tony Nikolic because he was the power behind Hoodie. He assembled a group of people, including Hoodie and Hoodie's podcast partner, John Larter, and wasn't he fantastic as well? And Tony Nikolic himself, he said that the people involved in this are guilty of willful blindness. They're turning the blind eye to it. He is absolutely right. And then we had, I can't pronounce the lady's name, Diana, and Dr. Van Sly and Alyssa Woods from the medical professions. I've forgotten the name of their group. They were very, very impressive. Look, we had so many impressive people there. The truth is going to come out. The truth is going to come out. And that's so very, very important. We'll have a lot of people have restored trust will restore trust in health system. We'll have a lot of people get treatment for their horrendous COVID injection side effects, adverse events. We'll have people able to live with the fact that they've lost someone to a COVID injection. So we need justice. We need justice, and we need it in spades. So I agree with you. Hoodie is fantastic. Thank you very much for being a part of this. We'll be back when we can. Maybe not next Friday. It's Good Friday. I'll spend time with my family probably. But we'll be back. We're trying to make it regular. It's sometimes difficult with our schedule. But thank you for listening. And God bless you. Have a great weekend. We'll be back at it in the Senate next week.